So, Cobra Kai Season 3. As you guys know, I've been seeing this show's praises since the first season came out on YouTube. Excellent show. Highly recommend it. I gotta do spoilers for not just Season 3, but the previous seasons in this. So if you haven't seen the show, I'd recommend go watch it, and then you can come back and look at my reviews. So I loved Season 1 and 2, and the question is, did Season 3 live up to the previous two seasons? Hell yeah, it did. Something I appreciate about this show is each season's a bit different, but kind of similar, if that makes sense. Like the themes change a bit. There's very clear character progression between the different seasons. They're a bit totally different, but there is a very good overarching narrative. So that's something I definitely enjoy about it. I think it strikes a very good balance between continuing the same. It's kind of funny because this show is extremely wholesome at its core, despite all the stuff that goes on in it. It does very much still have kind of that 80s, I don't know if innocence is the right term for it, but it does kind of invoke a bygone era, even if it is very much a modern show. So in season one, we saw Johnny kind of pick himself up from the disaster that his life had become. He took Miguel, who was the son of one of his neighbors, under his wing. I like to call this show based civic fascism because it's not quite like based civic nationalism in that it's not like kind of this pansy liberal thing, but it's like this older white guy takes this Hispanic kid under his wing and makes him into a Chad and makes him like based. So I do appreciate that aspect for it. A big reason this show exists, I feel, is to make fun of political correctness. Like, Johnny's very politically incorrect, and he doesn't really understand anything that happened in the previous couple decades. So he'll complain about immigrants, he'll complain about feminism, but in like a very, not like a really preachy way. He just doesn't really get it. He's just like, that shit's really gay. And he just acts like it's still the 80s and none of this stuff actually, like, the last 20 years didn't happen. Or I guess 30 years at this point in time. In fact, there's kind of a funny part in this where I think it's Johnny and Peter both. Sorry, Johnny and Daniel. I always say Peter just because of House of Cards, and there's a main character in season one called Peter Russo. So, where Daniel and Johnny are talking to the council, and they say chairman, councilman, and Kreese is like councilwoman, and there's just kind of a lot of stuff like that. And in this season, there's the zero tolerance for bullying policy, and it's just the cringiest, lamest. It does really remind me of stuff that they did in school. So there's times in this show where I cringe. It's not because the show's promoting it, but it's just so true to life. It just kind of triggers something within you. So in season one, we saw Johnny, like I said, who was a complete and utter loser. He was like a handyman. His life was going nowhere. And as kind of a fuck you to Daniel, and as kind of a way of helping these other kids, because there's a bunch of kids at the school who are getting picked on. They're kind of losers. So he restarts Cobra Kai. And initially, he kind of goes for the orthodox Cobra Kai philosophy: strike first, strike hard, no mercy. And it's very much kind of a douchebag philosophy. Like, it's not just about being tough. It's not just about taking what's yours like a man. It's like about just beating up people to prove you can, just being a bully and a dick for no like reason and that kind of thing. And that's kind of how season one goes. And you see his students improve. Like they become a lot more confident. They become a lot more self-reliant and that sort of thing. But at the same time, you can start to see a dark element to it, where a lot of them are just becoming worse people. They've seen a lot of improvements, but they're also kind of regressing. And season one ends with Miguel beating Robbie, who's Johnny's son, at the tournament, the All Valley karate tournament, or whatever you want to call it. And part of that was, I forget exactly what happens, but basically the Cobra Kai guys use a bunch of cheap shots and more or less cheat or going to go against the spirit of the contest. And Johnny kind of starts to feel like he's gone too far in some ways. So he goes back and he hangs out with some of his old Cobra Kai friends, and they express a bunch of reservations. And so Johnny kind of starts to think, okay, so maybe Daniel has some points. Like, I think it's important to teach these kids self esteem. I think it's important to teach these kids to be badasses and confident. But no mercy doesn't mean no honor. Like, just teaching them to be assholes isn't going to get them anywhere in life. So he starts to kind of modify it to be, I guess, a bit more like Miyagi-Do, a bit more like what Mr. Miyagi taught, a bit more like what Daniel taught. Daniel teaches. And I think it's season 2. I forget if it's season 1 or season 2, but Daniel reopens Miyagi-Do. And because Daniel's independently wealthy, he doesn't charge anyone to go to Miyagi-Do. And they very much teach kind of the pacifist philosophy of Mr. Miyagi. So you do have this very strong kind of conflict, the two. But even over the course of season 2, you can kind of see an ideal, like a slow Hegelian dialectic. You got Daniel and Johnny, and they're like a Hegelian dialectic, which will only be synthesized at the end of season 3. But Kreese shows up again, who was Johnny's old karate teacher, and he's like a complete sociopath. And Johnny finds him at a homeless shelter, and he takes him in. He makes him his second in command. He starts paying him. He tries to basically help him out. And Kreese starts to kind of undermine him, and at the end of the season, he basically pulls a coup d'etat and removes Johnny as the head of Cobra Kai. And Johnny's basically back to square one. So it's it's Johnny really starts to kind of doubt, like, that he starts to feel like, okay, so maybe trying to soften up a bit, maybe to try to take a more balanced approach at life isn't really that useful. And there's kind of this interesting conflict where Miguel is really close to Johnny. Johnny kind of has an on again, off again relationship with Miguel's mother, and he's really alienated from his son, who sees Daniel as his main father figure. And Daniel's daughter kind of goes back and forth between Miguel and Robbie. Uh, Robbie basically has been dealt a really bad lot in life. I don't like him because I kind of find him boring, and I don't think he's really necessary to the overall story. But yeah, so that stuff happens, and then season 2 accumulates with the Miyagi Do and the Cobra Kai students having a big fight in the school, and Robbie winds up. Miguel beats Robbie, but remembering Johnny's lessons, he shows mercy towards Robbie, and then Robbie takes a cheap shot at him and knocks him over the railing, and it breaks Miguel's neck, and Miguel is unable to walk. And him kind of learning to walk again is one of the core points of season 3, because it's very much a metaphor, like, for Johnny getting his life back together. So Johnny more or less has a breakdown at this point, and Kreese takes over Cobra Kai, and Johnny doesn't ever want to teach karate again because he feels he failed his students. And we have a really good moment in season 3 where he goes to talk to a friend of his who's a pastor, and he's like, "Look, man, I tried to do the right thing. I tried to, like, be the better man. I tried to teach my students to be the better man. I tried to temper kind of the, like, alpha male impulses with honor and mercy, and it didn't really work." And his friend's like, "Doing the right thing isn't easy, Johnny. It's but you have to do it because it's the right thing. Like, helping Kreese may have led to all this bad stuff, but it was still an honorable thing you did to try to help out a man when he's down. Trying to teach your students to like be more morally upstanding was the right thing to do. It's just it's not always easy to do it, and I think that's really helpful for Johnny. And he's kind of starting to come around on some of these issues. So there's kind of a war that keeps happening between Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do, where they just kind of get into fights. Under Kreese's tutelage, Cobra Kai is completely out of control, and they're just attacking and beating up random people. There's kind of a funny scene where they go and steal a cobra from the zoo, and they use the cobra to, like, as their mascot. So you have that. Johnny kind of eventually spends most of the season trying to help Miguel to walk again, and we get some hilarious moments where, like, he just does it in a very Johnny way. So he's just like, "Stop being a pussy and walk across the room." And some guy's giving him like physical therapy. He's like, "Physical therapy's for pussies. You're gonna walk across the room." And he tries shit like, he tries lighting Miguel's shoes on fire. He's like, "The fire extinguisher's over there. You got to run over to it." And he eventually gets him to, be able to walk again. And Miguel's not quite as strong as he used to be, but he's getting there. And then Johnny kind of starts an actual relationship with Miguel's mother. So I did like it. Johnny's old GF, who he's been lusting after for like the last 30 years, comes back, and that gets resolved for him. And they kind of decide they're not going to pursue a relationship. But Johnny isn't pining after anymore, so he's able to go, have an actual relationship with Miguel's mother. And Johnny tries to restart. He doesn't start Cobra Kai. He comes up with Eagle Fang Karate. He doesn't have any money, though, so he goes and is doing it in the park. And some of the Cobra Kai students get kicked out and they come back to Johnny. And obviously, Miguel's there. I don't really know what Johnny does for money. Like, I don't know, especially when he doesn't have any students. Maybe he just, I don't really get it, to be honest. But, yeah, so that stuff is happening with Johnny, and you're having the fight between Miyagi Do and Cobra Kai. And Daniel's dealership almost gets shut down because of the events of the second season. It's seen as bad press to deal with him. So a lot of the season three is Daniel going on his own kind of healing process, where he goes to Okinawa and he meets some people from the previous Karate Kid movies. And apparently, there's a girl he saved in the movie where he goes to Okinawa. I haven't seen it, but she turns out to be the VP of sales for the company that the car company that Daniel needs to get back on board. And he also learns some additional techniques that are more offensive in nature. And it's kind of, the message is Daniel's becoming a bit more like Johnny, where he realizes you can't just be passive in the face of everything. Sometimes you have to fight for what's right. Sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, and you kind of have to go on the offensive to defeat evil. And then the season ends with Johnny and Daniel kind of coming together. Johnny joins Miyagi Do as the co-sensei, and his students kind of are folded into it. I'm not sure if they're going to change the name for it, but they're both determined that they're going to beat Kreese, and they're going to kind of bring balance to the fourth. Like I said, it's kind of a Hegelian dialectic, where the two of them have finally kind of overcome their animosity, and they realize that the other has some decent points. And if not friends, they're able to gain kind of a mutual respect for one another. So that's more or less season three. And season four is going to be a showdown between Kreese's Cobra Kai and the unified forces of Daniel and Johnny. I would imagine that season four will probably be the last season. And while I'll be sad to see the show go, I think it's probably a logical place to end the show, as I'm sure that they'll kind of resolve the Kreese storyline, and all the other existing storylines, I think, are kind of winding down a bit. We're just kind of need a final bang to be resolved. So I appreciate that. An interesting thing they did in this season also is Kreese got a full backstory, which is kind of neat. And I kind of have mixed feelings. I kind of would have preferred if Kreese was just a psycho. But they kind of explain that he came from a really shitty background. Like his mother committed suicide. He got bullied a bunch. He enlisted the army and served in Vietnam, where he was special forces. In particular, he and his squad got captured by the Viet Cong, who made them fight to the death. And he just has severe PTSD. And he never really left the jungle. And he treats his students like they're special forces in the Vietnamese jungle. And that's kind of the reason why he's so crazy and so kind of psycho. Is he's still acting like he's at war. And I kind of, part of me would prefer if there wasn't an explanation and he was just a bad guy. I kind of get that they wanted to give him more character depth, but I kind of don't really want to sympathize with him. I kind of just want him to be the big bad. And I guess they're going to probably give him some form of redemption ending, but I almost kind of don't want that. But I don't know. We'll see, I guess. So those are my thoughts on Cobra Kai season 3. Overall, an excellent season. Highly recommend the show. Go watch it.